take one single breath for granted. God forbid love ever leave you empty-handed. I hope you still feel small.
Again, if you could be so kind as to start making your way to your seats. In case you want some of the information, in case there's any points that you missed or any stuff that you don't quite get to write down in time, I do want to give you a heads up that this is streaming live on the Fox 26 website, KMPH's YouTube page, as well as the Fox 26 Facebook page. So that way, that is an additional resource in case there's some points or some other information you want to share with anybody who wasn't able to join us this evening. We're going to get started over the next couple of minutes. Again, if I see some people still standing in the back, but we certainly want to thank everyone for making this a priority and being here tonight to join us for this very important town hall on human trafficking. There's a number of wonderful sponsors that help make this event possible. We've got ACES, we've got Thrivent, Academy West, and Tabernacle of Praise, the Sanger Scene as well. And we also see Centro La Familia, who's also back there providing wonderful resources. You'll have to forgive me as I don't have my glasses, so I can't see the other group that's back there, but a lot of wonderful community organizations are here to help provide information on different services that they can help you out with here as well. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, thank you very much for joining us. At this time, I'd like to call Chaplain Jessica Guerra to join us.
Good evening, everybody. Please stand for the invocation. Let's bow together. Each person is blessed and takes home more than they came in with. Lord, I pray for the speakers. Give them wisdom and strength as they speak. And Lord, I pray for each victim that is a victim of human trafficking. I pray that the chains are broken. Bless us, O Lord, for this we pray. Together we say amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. We want to also thank and recognize Councilmember Michael Montelongo for organizing this crucial town hall to help inform and educate families on the dangers of human trafficking. A number of other people will also be thanking, including the Beloved Survivors Trauma Recovery Center, Mayor Pro Tem Daniel Martinez joining us today, as well as Sanger High School Principal Coronado. At this time, I'd like to do the presentation of colors with the Sanger High School Honor Guard. If everyone could please stand. Sanger Mayor Frank Gonzalez makes his way up here.
Flag salute. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you can be seated. Hello, my name is Mayor Frank Gonzalez, and on behalf of the entire City Council, I'd like to welcome everybody here to hear this important presentation. We have assembled a team of subject matter experts to bring awareness and education to this basically crisis that's going on in the nation. And you know what, they're here to, you know, bring education, let people know there is human trafficking, you know, how to spot it, how to report it, and then they're going to be here to tell us how they prosecute it. And you know what, it is a team, because nobody can do this alone. And with this team and all of you guys, you know what, now we are all one big team. And the saying always goes, if you see something, say something. And don't forget that in just about everything in life. So please, you know what, we're a team, and thank you all for coming. I do have a proclamation I would like to read, and it goes, whereas Fresno EOC Central Valley Against Human Trafficking Program assist and identified over 2,100 victims of human trafficking from our local communities, and whereas the Central Valley Against Human Trafficking Program provides resources to attain self-identified goals, restore dignity, and whereas the International Labor Organization recognized there are over estimated 50 million people in modern slavery globally, where 1 in 4 victims are children. And whereas National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates 1 out of 6 endangered runaways were likely child sex trafficking victims. And whereas the United States Department of Labor identified 204 goods from 82 countries made by forced labor, child labor. And whereas the city of Sanger recognized the need for greater awareness and accountability in regards to human trafficking. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, Mayor Frank Gonzalez, and the Sanger City Council members do hereby proclaim January 2025 to be National Human Life. Thank you.
As we get started, just a couple of items of housekeeping. Again, want to remind everyone that if they've got some family, friends that aren't able to be with us, this is streaming live. I also want to point to some of our volunteers. If you have any questions that come up over the course of the town hall, I believe there are index cards. Where are the index cards? They're back there. There are index cards. If you want to raise your hand, volunteer can come and bring you an index card so you can write your questions. That way we can address them over to the panel as well. As we mentioned, a number of wonderful organizations and companies that have made this event possible. But again, we want to thank you, because this is an investment of your time as much as it is of the panelists that have been wonderful enough to come join us. And we do see some hands already going up for questions, for cards, right in the third row there, I believe. Bottom line is that this is a horrific crime that can affect anyone. There is no part of the valley, there is no part of the state, no part of the country that is immune to this. And in news, we oftentimes hear from families wanting us to share pictures of their missing teenager. And a lot of times it's a young woman or a teenager who, quote, met someone online and left with more than that. And they actually do help families heal from this as well. We're going to go ahead and introduce our panel. By the way, I'm Liz Gonzalez with Fox 26, a proud Sanger High School graduate, not from this campus. That tells you how old I am. All right, we're going to start with Sanger Police Chief Greg Gardner, who's joining us today, along with Sanger Police Detective Shayla Edwards. Now, Greg Gardner became the Chief of Sanger Police in 2020, and prior to that, he served 6 years as Chief of Police for Selma Police Department, and prior to that, he was a captain and a 34-year veteran of the Fresno Police Department. Sheriff John Zanoni joining us, born and raised in Fresno. He began his career with the Fresno Sheriff's Office as Reserve Deputy Sheriff in May of 1996, was brought on full-time as Deputy Sheriff in November of 1998, and continued to work his way up. During his career, he worked with the Boating Enforcement Unit, Court Services, Detention Custody Patrol, Magic, Search and Rescue Team. He has done it all. And in June of 2022 was elected Fresno County Sheriff. He was sworn in as the 26th Sheriff of Fresno County in January of 2023. I know we mentioned that the District Attorney Lisa Smittcamp was supposed to be joining us today, but in her place, joining us this evening is Senior Deputy District Attorney Nicole Idiart, who works, she primarily handles human trafficking cases and does gang prosecution when it comes to cases with the MAGIC team. MAGIC stands for Multi-Agency Gang Enforcement Consortium. So she is joining us today, represents California's 12th Senate District, which includes parts of Fresno, Tulare, and Kern counties. We thank you so much for being here. She was born and raised in 4th Assembly District from 2010 to 2016. She served as Senate Republican leader from 2019 to 2021 and is a proud advocate for small businesses, farmers, and families. Notably, she is the author of Senate Bill 14, which included sex trafficking of minors on the list of crimes defined as serious, wasn't considered a felony. Can you believe that? We were having that discussion, and thanks to you and your persistence on this, considered a felony, again, a crime under California's 3 strikes law. She and her husband, Rick, please. I say persistence because I know we reported a lot on your stuff, and she's holding another hearing, and the governor didn't want to listen, and you know what? The voice of the people united and made that happen. So thank you for your persistence. She and her husband, proud parents of 5 children and 11 grandchildren. And Debra Rush, we are honored to have you here, a powerhouse in the fight against human trafficking. She is the co-founder and CEO of Breaking the Chains, which is a leading organization that provides life-changing housing and trauma recovery services to survivors, and most recently founded Kendra's Cause, which was an organization inspired by the tragic murder of her own daughter, Kendra. With over 15 years of experience as an advocate, case manager, and alcohol and drug counselor, she's a recognized trailblazer in trauma-informed care, and as a survivor herself, she brings unparalleled passion and insight to her work, making her highly sought after, and we consider ourselves privileged that you are joining us here today. Debra Rush, thank you so much. Now, I know that we can do research and go online and find one database or another database with numbers, but the numbers don't mean as much as what you're about to hear from the panel. We'll go ahead and get started with Chief Gardner and Detective Shayla.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope none of you were doing the math as she was going through my work history. I will tell you, the mayor mentioned the expertise on the stage tonight. I can tell you that my expertise lies in my ability to work with these amazing people and with all of you out in the audience tonight. I've had an opportunity to do that over the last 4.5 years, and it's been remarkable. This community is remarkable. And I just really appreciate seeing you all here tonight. The practice of owning and controlling people as property, forcing them to work and limiting their freedom. You may have thought I just gave you the definition of human trafficking, but I didn't. The definition I just gave you was that of a term that we're more familiar with. That's the definition of slavery. The act of recruiting, transporting, or harboring people through force, fraud, or deception for the purpose of exploitation. Remarkably similar to slavery, that's the definition of human trafficking. It has existed in North America and all over the world since we first landed on the east coast of our country. In 2022, a report estimated that over 50 million people were the victims of modern slavery, and out of those were in a forced marriage. Nearly 60% of the victims of human trafficking are young women and girls. And it's been estimated as a business of over $150 billion in profit every year. Now, I know you've seen about it, you've read about it and seen it on the news. You might have a perception that human trafficking doesn't affect small towns like Sanger. In a moment, I'm going to bring up one of our detectives that's going to dispel that thought. No one is immune, as Liz mentioned moments ago. Our community is certainly not one of them that's immune. Human trafficking of our lives. So you're going to hear today from some really insightful people, some folks that have lived this experience, and those that are working to fight it on a regular basis. We want to start with Detective Shayla Edwards tonight, who's going to talk to you about how it's impacted our city locally and we'll hear from the rest of our panelists. Thank you.
I'm going to have to stay there. We're hearing some problems with the feedback, and since each of their panels are that way as well. Thank you. It's okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Detective Shayla Edwards. I'm a detective with the Sanger Police Department. I've been with the department for about 6 years. There's only a handful of us. If you know much about the Sanger Police Department, we have 3 full-time detectives and a detective sergeant. So we are all kind of general detectives, but my area of expertise is primarily in sex crimes, child exploitation, and human trafficking. As Chief Gardner mentioned, you know, we have a great community here in Sanger, and I think it's really easy for this idea to persist that human trafficking is a problem in other communities and in other places. But I can tell you, based on my very personal experience and my time here in Sanger, that that is not true. I've had the opportunity to investigate several cases in my time with the department that have an element of human trafficking involved. And I can tell you that right now we have an active investigation going on where we are attempting to recover a missing juvenile and have just discovered that she is currently a victim of human trafficking as well. So this is a problem that is currently affecting your community, that is currently a risk for your children and I you tonight because they need to hear this too. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about, you know, what we see, the trends that we noticed here in our community. As far as who is being targeted, you know, this isn't a problem just for troubled kids or, you know, people without guidance or people maybe without a stable home. Those are some of the risk factors, but the reality is this can happen to anybody. This happens to good kids and good students. This happens to kids who know better, and they still fall into the trap because predators are good at what they do, and they will target your children. They will wear on them, they will wheedle their way into their lives, and it's something that happens very quickly and very insidiously, and before you know it, you're caught up in this world, and it's really difficult to escape from once you're there. So primarily, we have young women that are victims of human trafficking, but it does occur with our young men as well. The primary means that they're being targeted that we're seeing more and more is through online activity, online enticement. And as I'm sure all of our parents in the audience know, your teenagers spend a lot of time online. And so if you're not really vigilant about knowing who they're communicating with, who they're talking with, who they're spending their time with, what they're doing online, it's very easy for them to become victims. And so things that you need to look for are, you know, changes in your children's behavior, changes in family from their normal activities. Are they being secretive about their activities? As things progress, we even look for warning signs. They may be showing up with money or items that they previously wouldn't have had access to and that you don't know how they had access to, because that's how this works. It starts with the kindness, the showing interest, and it progresses to gifts, and it's not something that somebody's going to come out on their face and say, but slowly they will work their way into your children's lives, and so you need to be aware and looking for those warning signs early on. And for my teenagers, that goes for you as well. It's your primary responsibility because you are the one who has the most power to protect yourself, and so if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. So trust your instincts, and if you get in a situation where you feel like it's spiraling out of your control, talk to somebody. Nobody wants to hear that something happened to you because you were too afraid to speak up. So there are a lot of resources available. Find somebody that you trust and talk to them. The earlier, the better, because the last thing that we want is for any of you guys to become victims, because I've seen firsthand the devastation that it causes in people's lives, and that includes people from our community, your peers, your friends.
Sheriff John Zanoni. It was working and then it wasn't.
There we go. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I think this is what we need, is we need community involvement. We need people that are willing to listen and to hear the stories of what we're going to share with you this evening, to hear from law enforcement, to hear from frontline detectives, to hear from a senior deputy district attorney who prosecutes these crimes, to hear from legislators who are in Sacramento fighting for us and fighting for the safety of our children and ensuring that, as we discussed at the beginning, that these crimes are felonies. And then hearing from Debra Rush and the stories that she has and the lives that she's saved and the lives that she's turned around are very compelling. And I also want to thank the city of Sanger just for the outstanding job of putting these together, along with the Sanger Unified School District. This is probably the third time I've been out here to this specific location to talk about public safety, to talk about fentanyl, and now tonight to talk about human trafficking. And when we talk about human trafficking, back in 2000 to 2005, I worked in the gang unit, worked the city of Fresno, the county of Fresno, went to about every inch of this county to arrest gang members. Human trafficking wasn't a big deal back then. Gang members were selling guns, they were selling drugs, they were committing gang members trafficking, pimping young girls. And financially is the main reason behind it, because it is a bigger benefit for them financially to be involved in human trafficking than it is to sell guns or to sell drugs. And it's a simple mathematical equation. Very sad, but simple. If I get 5 stolen guns from a burglary and I sell them, after I sell the 5 guns, I have to go commit another burglary, commit another crime, or obtain firearms. If I can get a young girl into human trafficking, the opportunity to sell her 10 and 12 times a day, over and over, financially it pans out for them. The gang members know this. They've started to realize this, and you'll hear some stories from our senior deputy DA here, but they've realized that that's a better opportunity for them to further their gang. That's a better opportunity for them to get money. They don't have to go out and hold up liquor stores. They don't have to commit robberies. They can make, and the more girls that they have, or the more people they have in their human trafficking operation, you can multiply that exponentially. And we see this through a lot of our black gangs. We had Operation Gridlock, which was a major gang operation here in the city of Fresno, which we assisted on with Magic. And there was over 500 law enforcement officers who took part in that, in the takedown, the search warrants, the investigation, the surveillance, you name it. And a common theme throughout that investigation was human trafficking. And it just doesn't impact troubled youth, people in poor neighborhoods. We've seen it in middle-class neighborhoods in Clovis and Fresno. Even moving away from the gang side of it, we've seen people fly into Fresno from other states because they met a 15-year-old girl on this phone. The girl snuck out of her house, out of the window of her parents' house, got into a car with this guy, drove to the airport, and flew to Denver. It happens. No one's immune from it. And as our Sanger detective said, the gifts. They start out treating you nice. Oh, hey, if you do this, if you get involved in this, you help me with this, you're getting perfume, you're getting purses, you're getting jewelry. But in the end, it usually leads to a life of indentured servitude for the person that's pimping you out, that's running you, that is forcing you into human trafficking. And the stories you'll hear from Debra, it's not pretty, it's not glamorous, it's sad, it's demeaning, it leads to a life of drug use and many other things. But we have hope. I mean, human trafficking used to be kind of like prostitution. It was a vice thing. Now it's become a gang thing. That's why our gang prosecutors handle it. That's why a lot of our gang detectives within Magic are out there investigating it and arresting these gang members for it. So we are making progress. Keep tabs on their phone. Ask them who they go with. It's not like when I was a kid growing up, you know, people came to your house or they called on your house phone. That shows how old I am. You know, they had to call on a house phone. If it wasn't home, then they didn't get a hold of me. But now, the communication through this with Snapchat and these other apps that can make things disappear, it's really hard to track what your kids are doing. But pay attention and ask the questions. And if new people come around and you get an uneasy feeling or you think that individual is up to no good, question your kid. Try to talk to that person if they make it to your house. But, you know, we have to protect our children. And there's enough people out there with the new laws that are passed, with fentanyl, with human trafficking, and everything else that's going on. We as parents, I have 3 kids, we have to do this. We have to protect our children. We have to ask those questions. We have to look out for their safety. As your sheriff, every day, that is one of we have to do, whether it's our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force for the exploitation of kids, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's putting on fentanyl presentations, whether it's my detectives out working Interstate 5, you know, stopping cars with 10 or 15 pounds of fentanyl in them. We do that every day because one of the most valuable things in our community are children. They're our future. We have to protect them. And so hopefully tonight when you walk away from this, you'll be educated, you'll have a better understanding, and you'll kind of know from the enforcement to the investigation, to the prosecution, to the legislation, to the recovery of the victims, you will come full circle and have a much better understanding of human trafficking and the impacts on our communities here in Fresno County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. And we want to remind you that as you're hearing the speakers and you think of a question, don't be afraid to raise your hand. We do have volunteers in the back that will come and bring you an index card so that way we can ask those questions of the panel as we move along. Our next speaker is Senior Deputy District Attorney Nicole Idiart.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Nicole Idiart. I am a Senior Deputy District Attorney for the Fresno County District Attorney's Office. My primary duties are to prosecute cases involving gang members and traffickers. It wasn't long ago that human trafficking really became something new to law enforcement in the Valley, at least, after discussing issues in other counties. Once we realized that this issue was blowing up and really try and tackle the problem. What I can say is that I'm surprised at how many young folks there are in the audience tonight, and I'm happy to see this many young folks in the audience tonight. Some of the advice that I will give the parents, the teenagers in here may not like necessarily, but it is pivotal to remember that most of these traffickers are reaching out to the children through their phones. I know that this is going to be touched on a million times tonight, and there's a reason for that. I wasn't going to share this story, but I think it's appropriate in this audience. This type of crime does not discriminate. I've been prosecuting human trafficking related offenses for approximately 2 years, and I can sit here and tell each and every one of you that you probably know somebody in the lifestyle or somebody who has been approached by somebody to get into the lifestyle. And I say this to you because I grew up in a middle-class home. I went to a great school, and I do have a family member who is almost 14 years old who has been approached by people online. Fortunately, you know, she looks up to me and she comes to her parents and she comes to family members with these approaches that have been made by traffickers. But we have had victims from the most affluent areas in Fresno to the poorest areas in Fresno. It really is very similar to domestic violence. It's something that happens to every single household or can happen to every single household. And it's important to remember that, you know, you're not exempt from this. All it's going to take as a parent to at least be on top of your children's schedule, know where they're at, but most importantly, and I know the teenagers in here are not going to like this response, but look at your teenager's cell phone. Because had my niece not come to me and said something to me, it is very possible that she could have been the next victim of this crime. As all the parents in here recognize, I have no doubt, your teenager has one bad day and suddenly the world is over, they want to run away, they don't want to talk to you, and all it takes is a predator from Texas, from Colorado, from Florida, from Los Angeles to reach out via Instagram, via Snapchat, via Facebook, and make promises to your child that they can't refuse. And their obsession simply becomes communicating with this one individual. What I can say is over the last year in 2024, as we did at Magic conduct a multi-agency wiretap operation primarily focusing on gang members. And I led that wiretap investigation through the prosecutor's office with the assistance of several agencies, including the Fresno Police Department and the Fresno Sheriff's Department or Office. And I believe even Sanger came in and helped on takedown day. The reason I bring this up is because when we're looking at gang members, we're thinking drugs, we're thinking guns, violence, and of the 35 or so individuals that we wiretapped over a series of about 3 months, 26 of them were ultimately charged with human trafficking. Many of the victims involved were minors. And I know Sheriff Zanoni touched on this, but it's important to note that the risk of driving around with another individual isn't a risk at all. The risk of driving around of arrest by traveling with female, as a citizen, what I can say is keep an eye out. If you see a grown adult with 1 or 2 younger girls, it doesn't hurt to say something. Go with your gut. Keep your eyes open, because that's really the most important thing. If you see something, say something. I would like to thank, while I'm up here, Senator Grove for the passing of SB 14. As a prosecutor, it's a dream, because it's mind-blowing that a grown adult can traffic a minor with really little consequence. Because of Senator Grove's efforts, SB 14 passed, which does make that offense a strike, and our office jumped all over that, and within the first month of that passing, we took a case to trial, an adult trafficking a minor and trafficking her from the Fresno County Jail. Sheriff Zanoni did not know about this, obviously, but there were videos and audios, and these guys will go at extensive lengths to get these girls on the outside to make money and put money on their books. So because of the efforts of Senator Grove, he was convicted and put away for 12 years, 8 months. He now has a strike on his record and will have to register as a 290. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Grove?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for that compliment. I too want to thank all the parents and the Chamber Singer of Commerce, and praise God for the community that came out, and you parents that here, and I don't know if you made your teenagers come, but I'm really glad to see a lot of students in the audience as well. When I got elected in 2010, I went up there to fight for our farmers and our job creators and those that provide jobs to individuals and our energy industry. And I found myself learning about a subject matter that is heart-wrenching. And I went to a Human Trafficking Awareness Month program that the district attorney was putting on. And I listened to the horrific story of a lady that is a survivor, author, business owner, works in the school which she was trafficked from as a child, as an intervention specialist. offered on the campus to help at-risk youth or youth that were lured into this dark underworld. And when I listened to her stories about being trafficked during school, after school, it was familiar trafficking, so it was her mother that was trafficking her because her mom liked nice things. And I listened to the story and I was just heartbroken, couldn't believe it. And when I walked up the end of the seminar to introduce myself, she shared with me that the legislature doesn't look at this and make it a serious felony or a strike, so that you can go to prison for a longer period of time, especially if you traffic a minor child. And I just couldn't believe that. And sure enough, go back to Sacramento, we verify it with public safety, and it's not. So we went after a pursuit to get it to be a strikeable offense or a strike offense. In 2022, we introduced SB 42, which would make it a human trafficking, either labor or sex trafficking, a serious felony in the state of California, and a violent felony. There's a lot of violent crimes, but this is a violent felony, and it should have always been one. That bill, we wanted to make it a strikeable offense, make you register as a sex offender. As mentioned, the 290 number, we talk in code a lot. 290 means you're going to register as a sex offender, and to make somebody pay a $25,000 fine and go to prison for a really long time, especially if you're a repeat offender. And that bill died in public safety in 2022. Well, that just, I think they wanted me to give up. It emboldened me, and I came back in 2023 and introduced SB 14. And when we went to public safety, there was a groundswell of media. Sound of Freedom was being released. Our law enforcement partners engaged. Our district attorneys throughout the state engaged. I think it was endorsed by both law enforcement and the district attorney's office. We had communities, faith-based organizations, pastors mobilized, congregants. It was really just a huge groundswell, and I was just like praising God because there were so many people, our nonprofits. I met Debra Rush, introduced me to other people that were fighting this and, you know, meeting the needs of survivors so that they could live a more productive life. And we entered the Public Safety Committee with a bill similar to what we had introduced in the past, but we were forced to take amendments in public safety. The Public Safety Committee chair required that we, in order to get the bill out, we took amendments to reduce it to minors only, no adults included. Which really broke my heart because one of the lead survivors that we had was Jenna McKay. And again, like the district attorney said and the sheriff said, anybody's vulnerable. Jenna McKay came from a well-to-do family, two-parent household, deacons at their church, full ride scholarship to Vanguard University. She met a guy when she got down there. She supposedly fell in love within 2 months. He took her to Vegas against her parents' wishes, and it took her a long time to get home. And there was some brutality and some horrible things that happened to her while she was there to, reach out to other survivors. So it does happen to everybody, but we went in, we had to take that amendment to only have it be minor children. They reduced the fine from $25,000 to $10,000. You didn't have to register as a 290 sex offender unless you had a repeat offense. So it was almost like everybody got a freebie, which was absurd to me. It was just really crazy how this whole process went forward. We ended up getting it out of committee. It got off the floor on the Senate side with a unanimous vote. It was on consent. It went to the Assembly side. We didn't anticipate problems, and it died in the Assembly. They killed it. Their response to me was this disproportionately affects people of color and LGBTQ communities. And my response to them was only if you're selling kids for sex. That's it. That's the only way this bill affects you. If you're selling kids for sex, I want you to go to prison for a long period of time, and I want my district attorneys and my law enforcement to have tools in their toolbox to make sure that happens. It got a media firestorm. I actually was touring an event the next day at a human trafficking organization that does kind of what Debra and others that help survivors do, and my phone started buzzing in my hand. I looked down, and it was Gavin Newsom. And I thought, should probably take this call. So I stepped out, and he said, good morning. I said, good morning, sir. And we do have a working relationship, me being a conservative and him being Gavin Newsom. We have a working relationship. We do, especially on this subject matter, and the first partner as well. And he said, I'm very upset at what happened. And I said, frankly, I am too, sir. And he said, permission. And the same people that killed the bill on Tuesday reheard the bill on Thursday, passed it, got it back to our house. We sent it to the governor's desk, and he signed SB 14, which gave our law enforcement and our district attorneys the opportunity to prosecute perpetrators that sell children for sex. it's like I have PTSD dealing with this subject matter. I applaud these people to my right, and I really just love this woman to my left. It is a very hard subject matter to deal with, and I don't know how Detective Shayla, the district attorney, the sheriff, how you investigate and are on the front lines with this, because you can never unsee the things that I've seen. You know, law enforcement comes in and goes, look at this, and I'm like, I don't want to look at that. Like, it's the most horrific. Brands, physical cattle brands on women, tattooed brands, the beatings that are endured, the things that they see every day in investigation, and what these individuals endure while happening to a human being, multiply that by 1,000, and I don't even think you're close. And I know that sounds horrible, but you can never unsee the things that you do, so I applaud them for doing what they do. They came to me again, and they said, Debra and her team from the survivor side, and law enforcement partners, and said, you know, we really need to address the buyer side. It was an odd thing for me to hear. I've never been in the situation that Debra was in, or her daughter, or anything like that, but their plea to me was, the trafficker fed us, he clothed us, bought us gifts, did these things. Doesn't make it right. He forced us to do these things, but once the buyer shelled out that $100 or that $500, the brutality that buyer thought that buyer had on ownership to do whatever they wanted to do with anybody they chose to lay that money down for an hour or 2 hours or whatever time, was sheer hell. There's no other explanation for it. And to be a buyer, a solicitor, or somebody engaging in solicitation to buy a minor for sex in the state of California was a misdemeanor. Maximum 2 days in jail, long enough to explain to your wife where you've been, and that was it. Even if that was to happen, most of the time it was just a citation. So we introduced SB 1414 in 2024. Again, a very rocky roller coaster ride in the state legislature. We went and wanted everybody 4 years in prison, and I know most of you out there are going 4 years in prison. It should be, 12, 14 years in prison. But we live in the state of California. It was only 2 days in jail. So we pursued the 4 year in prison, which we told us that's probably what we could try to get. Register as a sex offender, a $25,000 fine, and for all minors. And we were shocked and surprised that, again, the Public Safety Committee that's supposed to keep the public safe and policy shanghaied us again, and they took out 16 and 17-year-olds because they felt like they were old enough to make their own decisions. I don't care if you're an adult. If somebody has care, custody, and control of your life, you cannot make your own decisions. So they took out 16 and 17-year-olds. They made it a wobbler, meaning that the state of California district attorneys could decide whether they charge it as a felony or a misdemeanor. And in my district, Kern, Tulare, and Fresno counties, I had no questions. Lisa Smith, my Fresno district attorney, Tulare, and Kern County district attorney will prosecute as felonies straight across the board, no questions asked. But what will we do with down in Los Angeles when we had Gascon? Those girls would be left behind. And so to swallow that pill, it was very, very difficult. I mean, extremely difficult. But we didn't get here, and Rome wasn't built in a day. If we didn't take the amendments and move the ball to protect 15 years old and below, when it went over to the Assembly. Again, this is the Public Safety Chair, Aisha Wahab from the Bay Area, Scott Wiener from San Francisco, and Nancy Skinner from Berkeley that stopped this bill and changed this language. They said it was just words. They said that actually assaulted, then it shouldn't be constituted as a felony. I bet you can ask these law enforcement partners that sit next to me that if they're going through with the deal and they're shelling out the money, they're going to perform the act. Why don't we stop it before the child is accosted? So we got the amendments, we went to public safety, and I was brutal. I mean, every time somebody in the media would say, what happened? I said, they don't care that children are being bought and sold for sex. And I had no problems calling them out whatsoever. Got an interesting phone call from the first partner, Jennifer Sable Newsom. She wanted to help. And so with her assistance, again, a bipartisan thing, because it should not be about party, it should be about protecting our children. She went down and took a tour at in Los Angeles on the Blade, and she did not like what she saw. And I explained to her that it's happening all over, and she helped us get engaged, and we were able to insert 16 and 17-year-olds back in the bill, not under the same protections. They have to prove they were trafficked before they can the perpetrator can be prosecuted. But we did get the bill signed by the governor, And this year we're going after a cleanup piece of legislation. We are going to go after 290 registrants, which you're going to register as a sex offender. The argument that registering as a sex offender ruins people's lives is not a good argument. I looked down at Pastor Montelongo when I got ready to almost cuss. That is a stupid argument. It's a stupid argument because you talk about ruining someone's life. You look at the person that's been sold and bought into this horrific underworld of slavery. We're going after 290 registrants, which is make them register as a sex offender. We're going to add 16 and 17 back in. That's our fight to make sure they're under the same protections. We're going to go after the gang of 26 is what they call it, gang enhancements, so that if you're a gang member and you're selling girls for sex, we're going to do a gang enhancement to put you in prison longer. And so we're going to treat it like a divorce. And if anybody's ever been divorced, we're going to ask for everything, including your neighbor's stuff, and we're going to take everything that we can get and hopefully move the ball a little bit further. The district attorney, assistant district attorney talked about the cases. I can tell you that SB 1414 just went on the books in January. 14 was on the books. And I got a call from Salinas where they had picked up a girl that was taken out of Stockton. She was 12 years old, held for 14 days. It was the most brutal experience of her life. And that individual that did that to her is serving got sentenced to 24 years because it was a second offense on a strike. And so it is working. Our children are being protected. But again, I'm just their marching orders. Like they tell me what they need, and I do my best to get it. But we couldn't do it without them, without her, and without all of you. So thank you.
Before we go to Debra, just again want to remind folks that if you have any questions for the panel, please raise your hands. I see one card's already filled out over here. But if you have any questions for the panel, Karen with the Sanger Chamber, some of you already know, is helping out. And she's got the blank index cards that you can fill out with questions. That way we can start getting some questions ready for as soon as our speakers wrap up. And next is Debra Rush. Thank you so much for being here again.
Oh, it's an honor. I am truly honored to be here today. I actually get the honor of speaking to some of my favorite audience, and that is our youth here tonight. And so, as they have talked about, I am also a survivor of human trafficking, and most recently, the mother of a child who was not just trafficked, but murdered in trafficking. And so I'm here to just present to you first and foremost that human trafficking is truly one of the most complex and complicated crimes that is happening. And it happens in so many different facets. So I know we've talked a lot about trafficking that is happening right here in the Central San Joaquin Valley. Everything from some of the brutality of what we're talking about that's happening from criminal organizations, cartel-based, gang-based trafficking that's happening that is very violent, that has third parties involved, to self-exploitation and other things that have begun to emerge amongst your peer group, and this is probably going to ring some bells with you guys here, that is starting to happening on platforms like OnlyFans, right? And so you may know, you may have thought, some of our young girls in here, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but if I'm quite honest, statistically, I know there are a handful of you in here who have an OnlyFans account. That is just the fact of what we have right here in this room. And I'm sorry if I'm freaking your parents out, but this is very, very true. This is a platform, as I start, that for most youth, you may feel safe online. You may feel like the person that you're engaging with is in another location. They're not coming into my bedroom. I'm not going to their location. The interactions that I'm having or that they're purchasing online are not as risque as what may be happening in the world of the sex trade or prostitution or hoes or whatever terminology you're using within your peer group. But please make no mistake that what we are seeing, and unfortunately, as our sheriff and some of our law enforcement partners have talked about, what I see each and every day coming through our doors is these incredible stories of what I have coined as gang stalking. And I'm going to pivot from there for just a moment. And I don't know how familiar some of you guys are, what neighborhood you come from, but I come from West Fresno. It's a neighborhood that I spent a majority of my childhood in that's heavily embedded in gangs off of Martin Luther King and North. And so, and then when in my early 20s, I ended up, once I was already embedded in trafficking myself, moving to in our area off of First and Belmont on Bond Street, where again, I was reintroduced to the Bulldog Gang. So my mother, who was a big part of, in and out of my life, was in a gang from before I was born in through the end of her life. And so understanding how gangs operate was something that was also very intricate. And one thing about gangs, and this goes back to mob times, to what you're seeing right now, is gangs don't just come in and touch a situation. They take it over. I remember in our neighborhood, there was no movement that happened without the neighborhood, without the careful watch of the gang. From the older population within our neighborhood that may be shopping and doing things and knowing to get into their house at certain times of night, to watching and seeing who was pulling in and off of our block. It was monopolizing. And if you don't know what that means it takes over everything. I want you children in here to understand, or you youth, because you're not children anymore, to understand that even if you are in what may seem like the most safest environment and you're hearing these gangs and you're like, well, that would not happen to me because, one, I'm not going to talk to some weirdo who calls me on the back end, or I'm going to do this and this is going to be something I'm going to do on my own. One of the scariest things that I have started to see emerge is girls that I have talked to, and once we're at a place where we realize that somehow a third-party trafficker got involved, is they usually are starting to talk to us more about starting on these platforms, as I stated, like OnlyFans. Starting in these places, in these areas that seem like they are not as in depth. And for parents, if you don't know what OnlyFans is, this is your little education on this. OnlyFans is a platform where outside people can subscribe and send money to your child to send risque photos, do other things, and basically have this interaction online without them ever even leaving the room. But the problem is, and what I call gang stalking, is there's individuals. There are other young women, there are young men who are also stalking these, and they are getting your profile names. They are then searching you out on Instagram and on Facebook and on Snapchat, and they are very methodically targeting you. I know this because after searching for hours and hours on my daughter's tablet and having so many conversations and looking back and putting together so many pieces over the last 10 months, I realized that's how my daughter was initially targeted. When we talk about this can happen in any neighborhood and to anyone, let me tell you that first and foremost, what we see at Breaking the Chains, we see just as much children per capita, and if you don't know what per capita, that means per amount of people in a population, coming from our rural communities as we do our major metropolitan communities. For law enforcement, their numbers may look a little bit different because where they're busting the individuals are usually in Fresno or in these city limits, but the addresses don't change. For my child, it was very disheartening, but eye-opening, because following her service, there were so many people that reached out to me, so many of her school-age friends. I was actually able to trace back as young as the age of 14, where I had so many people, and I fault them. I want to make this disclaimer. I love everybody so much that came and spoke to me and gave me their condolences. But the eye-opening part for me was how many people came to me and said, I seen this at this age. School-age friends. I'm looking at you because you could save someone's life. Her peers that came to me and cried tears at her service and said, I'm sorry, I seen this and I should have said something. I had another girl, and she's become such an incredible advocate. Her name is Amanda. She doesn't mind me sharing that, and I love her. She's starting to stand shoulder to shoulder with me and starting to volunteer at Breaking the Chains, and she carried so much of this weight on her shoulders following my daughter's death, because she told me that at Wawona Middle School, she's seen these signs of things happening. Another friend directly to her said she was there when Kendra opened her first account. You see, what was so eye-opening for me about this, and why I bring this to you, is because my daughter sat in these rooms. I have another so in-depthly, but years earlier when she was only a child, she lived in hotels with me on Parkway where she knew the brutality that I had experienced. Her own father was a known trafficker in this town, and so she's seen from all aspects of it what truly was hiding on the other side, but that she would never do what some of these other girls were doing. She was too smart for that, and she felt she had this protection. I was also a part of a major operation, a few of them, and obviously I'll never be able to trace entirely back, but two young men who have been connected to some of these nefarious groups targeted my daughter online. And the more I look back again at these same messages, she was targeted probably, most likely, because of the platforms that she was on. Because these individuals, they have these girls or these young men who are out conducting these activities or involved in trafficking, they are sitting back online, smoking blunts, drinking drinks, and just scrolling. They're looking for vulnerable individuals who may already be in positions that are compromising. You see, if they catch you in this compromising position, then it's very, number one, they know that you are susceptible to being involved in this type of activity. Number two, if I popped up with your OnlyFans and I was going to go show your mom or your teacher or somebody else close to you what was happening, that you would want that exposed. And again, as Sheriff Zanoni said, there's not this monster in the closet, and sometimes we have this myth and we watch shows where people are kidnapped in white vans. I don't have stories of gang members showing up at people's front doors or bursting through and saying, using explicit terms and saying, you better give me your money right now. That's not how it happens. They simply sneak in on a back-end DM and they begin to send you messages. They begin to become your friend. They begin to recruit you and groom you, and they have taken the time to methodically get to know what kind of makes you wire and fire. And before you know it, you are in a compromising position that you can't get out of. That story would continue on all the way up until just a matter of a few weeks before my daughter's life was taken, and a very near and dear friend of mine came to me, and this is, like I said, really whenever I started putting all this back together, and this it just wowed me. And she said only 2 weeks prior to this, she had received a call from a national survivor who said she had received a call from a survivor that I worked with that said, "I seen Debra's daughter on a video on Figueroa Avenue, the same place where she would lose her life a few weeks later, but I don't know how to have this conversation with her." So again, I really want to make sure that I reinforce the message of seeing something and saying something. And when I look around the room and I see the peer group that is sitting here before us at Sanger High, and parents, you've already received a lot of really great information from the leaders here. My heart really got pulled to talk to you guys. The honor that I have in saying this is because I believe you're the key to the future. You see, we can talk to your parents and our legislators, we can continue to vote, and I hope that's what you guys get from this as our leaders talk about how you need to get engaged, but to you, because you have the key to save someone's life. You see, quite often, it's not me that my daughter wanted to listen to as I spoke behind this mic, it was her peers. It's that person that may be sitting right next to you, or that person, and some of you have that person in your mind already today from your class or from a group that you know, a compromising position. Maybe you don't feel like you can tell your mom. Maybe you don't feel like you can tell whoever. Call me. And if nothing else, my plea to you today is if you see something, for God's sake, say it.
Thank you, Debra. And it's one of those things where we look around and we see our young girls, and a lot of times it's that flattery you feel because somebody older is paying attention to you. And you think, okay, this is fun. And with phones now, you can hide it from everybody. So I'm going to start the questions with asking, I know we were talking, Sheriff Zanoni pointed to his phone more than a few times, as did the Deputy DA. I know you mentioned the social media apps, but I know that there are other apps where teens can hide messages. What are some of the apps that parents need to be looking out for besides obviously Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram? Shayla, I'll bring you in this as well because I know that this is your, just go for it.
I mean, the reality is every time there's one app that's taken down, another takes its place. So the reality is you have to look at everything. Yes, there's the obvious ones like Snapchat, Instagram. I think you're not going to look for their secondary messaging apps, so their text now, their WhatsApp. For communicating, things like Reddit, where you think it's just people, talking about random topics online. If it has a direct messaging feature involved, there are predators on there and they are looking to talk to your kids. Not only their phones, their gaming systems. If you have a kid who's a gamer, they're chatting with people online, and there are plenty of predators on those sites, on those games, looking to talk to your kids too. Things where they can hide photos. There are applications that are designed to look like calculators and things like that, and they will turn off if they flip their phone over. They will, it's hiding in plain sight. And so as vigilant as the parents can be, this is my second opportunity to implore all of our teens who are here in the audience, you cannot handle this on your own, and you're going to get in over your head way quicker than you think. So be honest. If you're worried about getting in trouble, I can promise you your parents care way more about your safety than anything you might have done up until that point, so don't hide from them. If you need help, let them know. You guys are smart. If you want to hide stuff, you will. So don't be afraid to speak up and reach out for help. And parents, I understand that we want to strike this balance of respecting privacy and autonomy, but safety is most important, and so stay on them. And they might hate you for it right now, but one day they will thank you for it.
Go for it, any of you.
And I would like to add to that, you know, I brought up my niece. She's 13 going on 14, and I'm not technologically savvy as, you know, teenagers in this room probably. And we sat down and she told me about an app called Telegram, and I have it right here. I mean, you can get drugs, you can, you know, amongst other services that selling yourself. What I can also say is that these messages that are coming in from predators, I call them predators because that's other officers that have fake accounts. I personally have a fake account, so I can monitor certain individuals as well. And I'll tell you, without posting at all on an undercover Instagram account, we are getting flooded with messages from pimps. All it takes is onto, and they are going to start just flooding your teens' accounts with messages. So you're not exempt. You know, just watch the messages, and we get hundreds. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these messages a year, if not thousands, from pimps reaching out to our undercover account. So if that puts something into perspective for you, if that's all you get out of it, to look at the messages that your teens are getting from these individuals, if it saves one kid in this room from going down that rabbit hole and getting sucked in, then it's worth it. But just pay attention, because these apps are tricky and there are ways to hide things. So talk to your teen, you know, get an expert on the technology. It's not going to be me, but that would be very helpful going forward for parents.
No, you said that the app you said was the Telegram?
Telegram.
Okay, that's another one to put on the radar.
It's one of the good, getting more and more tricky for law enforcement to use and for us to prosecute, because you can't screen record certain apps anymore. So a lot of the evidence that we would use to collect, we have to kind of get creative and use another phone to record what's on somebody else's screen. But these apps are getting trickier, and the teenagers are getting smarter at hiding things. So we have to be vigilant.
I think I would add too is, because like she said, I think it's really important to understand that apps change. So there's 3 things that we tell our parents. Number 1, this includes gaming systems, because we've seen huge trafficking cases coming out of Roblox and Fortnite, which are 2 of the most popular gaming systems that all of our children are using, is if there is a platform or an app where your child has access to, and know that. So the 2 other things that I tell, you know, because again, she said we could sit here all day long, right, is there's 2 things that most of us have. And so iOS actually, so if you have an Apple phone, and I know kids, I'm sorry already, I'm going to be like, dang it. My kid's already smiling back there because she knows. iOS has parent screen time. Parent screen time is absolutely amazing, and there are YouTube videos that take a matter of minutes that will walk you through this. And if you even need more help, you can reach out to our organization, and our advocates are happy to walk you through. You can even come in and we can help you set the phone up. But this parental screen time is awesome with Apple in putting in a layer of protection to make sure that explicit images, explicit messages, and things like that are blocked. It's stopped. I also highly encourage you controlling contacts, right? Your children, you can control what contacts are on your children's phone through this iOS. This means that they cannot add or delete contacts. They cannot turn off or adjust their location. There's so much that's on there. So that's one. That's probably one of my favorite. But the other, if you have Android or anything else, is I highly recommend, I mean, to save your child's life, $9 a month is nothing, is Bark. Bark is absolutely amazing. Bark is an app, and it's Bark just like a dog. It has a blue dog mark. Again, you can go to Instagram, our link tree, just click into that. You can also call us. We will send it to you, and we have Bark instructions on there. And Bark you can actually have plugged into your phone, and it will completely monitor the contents of your child's phone. My daughter, I know I'm just using her for so much blast right here, but I would rather be safe than sorry. But one of the things that used to just drive her crazy was she could be at school, and you could just be like making a statement that would say, your child is in a critical situation. And I would click in, and then I'd be able to read. And I mean, there were so many times, she's young, she's 15 now, but she was getting popped, and she's like, I didn't even know you knew I had that app. I was messaging on this, because Bark was monitoring her entire system. You can put it on tablets and computers. So again, Bark, iOS if you have Apple, contact our advocates. I believe we have Central La Familia back here. So there's other resources back here that you can get with some of our human trafficking partners that would be happy to help you get some of this stuff set up.
Sheriff, I do have a question, though. I know that when we've done town halls before when it comes to fentanyl, and I don't know if you might have the answer for this, or Shayla, or even Deborah, I know that when it comes to fentanyl, there are certain emojis that are code. Are there any emojis that are code for human trafficking as well?
Yeah. There are too many to mention.
I'm sure there's some, okay, I can imagine some, sorry. Maybe that wasn't the right question to ask, but any other ones that... Roses.
So roses usually are a term for payment. And so someone exchanging roses could show that they are offering money. You have, and Nikki, you see a lot more of these, the up-and-coming ones, like she said. A lot of it you can use some common sense. Again, common sense plays, I mean, I know we like to play like word scrabble and stuff, but I also tell parents, like, pay attention to what they're saying. Look at those things. I mean, there's certain, I don't want to be explicit, the eggplant.
That's the same struggle.
Yeah.
You can Google them, and I hate to say that, but in preparation for a human trafficking training that I was actually giving to law enforcement down south, I had put a couple of slides in there, and it got to the point to where the slides just kept getting longer and longer because there are so many emojis, and there's so much terminology. So it's all about context. If you see something that's kind of funky, you'll know. The fact that you're here tonight, shows that you're interested in educating yourself on this type of industry. So common sense goes a long way in these types of cases.
Thank you. Chief Gardner and Detective Edwards, do you guys find that a lot of the people that you arrest in these cases or talk to in these cases, do they know their ways, like the bad guys? Do they know things that they can get away with to avoid certain charges? Or, I mean, I see Senator Grove as well. We'll call on you as soon as they're done as well.
Absolutely, they do. A lot of these predators, these perpetrators, they're familiar with the laws. They know. They educate themselves on what they can and can't get away from. They know the things that they can and can't say online to avoid being flagged. The social media sites, I work with a lot of them doing the child exploitation cases, and they have tools and algorithms set up to monitor for certain content or words, or to monitor activity of adults trying to meet with minors. But even with all of that, we are just constantly inundated with these cyber tips still, because they figure out ways around it. They figure out how to say things without saying them, and so it's something that you kind of have to take some time to educate yourself. And another recommendation that I wanted to make is, if you don't feel comfortable or like you have enough knowledge to really know what it is that you're looking at, you have a niece, a nephew, a friend, a family member, a family friend who's a young person who can help you decipher some of that too. So, it takes a village, so bring other people on board and use them, lean on other resources to help monitor what your kids are doing. And also look out for secondary devices. This is something that we're phone to communicate with. So if there's not activity on their primary phone that they have, be aware they might be communicating on a secondary device or a younger sibling's device, tablets, even old phones that you thought were decommissioned.
Right.
They will find a way. So just be aware that it may not be just the main cell phone that you have to worry about, but really any electronics.
I see some of you, Sheriff.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention on that, it's not specifically human trafficking, but we've done what we call Operation Hook. We've had Operation Chat Down in the past, and that's when our detectives are basically decoys online, posing as 13, 14, 15-year-old girls and boys. And when we've had these operations, we've caught 17 to 20 people in one operation. But if you talk to the detectives who are doing this, there's another 30 people who are hinting at what they want, but they're so savvy and they know exactly what they're doing because they've been through this before, and they know kind of where to draw the line, but they're out there. And they're just able to kind of figure out that this isn't a safe situation for them. It's going to result in them probably getting arrested. But they're smart. They know what the key words are. If they've been arrested before, they kind of know the pattern that led to their arrest, because when they went to court, they got to see all the discovery. But it's very sad, but there's such a market out there for these young girls. To give you an example, a couple years ago we had an operation, and one of the individuals who solicited our undercover detective was going to meet over behind Fashion Fair at Cary Park. And so he agreed to the deal, and we have to be very careful because they do surveillance. They're really looking. They get spooked real easily. We use drones and all kinds of stuff, but I don't want to give away too much here. But we got this individual, and he showed up in a United States Forest Service. He got arrested. He got booked into our jail. He was out of River, explained to his wife how he got caught, and I guess this wasn't his first time. That's the point that you never know who it is. They come from all walks of life. You never know who that individual is, so your kids should be very wary. They should, trust but always verify, because these individuals are savvy. They know how to get around some of the things that we do. Just like we do research on how to catch them, they do research on how to avoid detection, arrest, and prosecution.
We're getting some questions from the folks in the audience. Somebody said, and maybe I'll ask this to Senator Grove, from my understanding, there's legislation mandating that schools educate students about human trafficking. Do you know anything about this? Can you explain anything on that?
Yes, so we did get some, it's not funded yet, so we have to work with schools to be able to put human trafficking. It's basically things like you see in a hospital or a doctor's office that we got a few years ago, so that you could, if a trafficking victim got injured or something happened to them and they went to the hospital and they went back into the back room, there's a sign that says, if you're being trafficked, please do the QR code or call this number and report it. And then there's a way to get them out of the hospital safely. So there is some education materials that are going to be distributed out to schools. I think they're designing them. I don't know if they're out yet, though. Do you know? I don't know if they're out yet. So it is available. If you can contact my office, Shannon Major is here, or you can contact me, and we can see if we can get that information available to you. We do have some in some parts of the district that I represent where it's available, and the schools are like, we can't afford it, we can't print it, and we had a local business owner use a color printer to print it so that they could hang it up in the bathrooms. I want to echo some comments or talk a little bit about what the sheriff said and what Detective Shayla said. And the reason why I want to say that is because 1 in 4 people, it's a 1 in 4 number. So if you look around and count every 4 persons in this room, one of you is going to be targeted for trafficking. And I want to emphasize the fact that in this process, no matter what you think, what you know, your parent is your best friend when you think about it, or someone you know could be your best friend. And no matter what you did up to that point, because they are sly, they are good, they know you got a dog named Chocolate and he's brown and you go to this school or you go to this gym. I mean, they track you. We see that with our law enforcement partners. And maybe they talk you into sending an explicit photo, or you show them your chest or whatever, and or whatever it is, right? Whatever they talk you into doing, until you walk out that door and you meet with them, no matter what you did before that moment. It doesn't matter, because saving your life before you make that first meet is important, because the horror stories that I hear, and like Debra hears and law enforcement hears, it will take months, sometimes weeks, sometimes just days, but months and years to get you back. I can tell you that, and I'm talking to you guys, you students here, no one is offering you free concert tickets in Europe. You're not getting a modeling contract anywhere from anyone. And I say that because just last year in Sacramento at the airport, the counter personnel at an airline was alert enough to call security, and they actually stopped a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, because the 15-year-old didn't want to go by herself, so she took her 13-year-old sister, and she was communicating with the trafficker, and they were getting on a plane, go do this modeling thing for TV. They're not offering those things to you. I can tell you that in this last process with the solicitation piece, our law enforcement partners out of Sacramento provided us with a copy of the book. You want to know how smart these people are? There is a how-to book on how to attack the most vulnerable people in our society, which is foster youth. And there is a how-to book on how to become a foster parent for young children. And again, I want to say it, but it's so explicit that it's inappropriate to say in this type of setting. But they teach you how to teach that child to be acceptant of the things that are happening to them as a normalcy in childhood. And children don't know what they're doing is wrong because it's been normal since they've been 2 or 4 or 6, you know, and it's a normal process for them to go meet the landlord to pay rent. It's a normal process. So they normalize these horrible things that happen to these children. So just think about that for a second and know that no one can escape from this. I say escape from this. You're not someone that's immune from this. You, district attorney's niece, right? So it doesn't matter. I'm just telling you to be very vigilant. And parents, you got to get back into a relationship with your kids. Not that you're not. Being here tonight says that you are, but you should know what your kids are doing. I was sharing with Debra earlier. I have PTSD. I don't know how these people do it. I went to the mall. This guy pulled this girl over. I followed him. I followed him until I found out who they were and what they were doing there. And it ended up being a father and a daughter. But it's like you notice things that you have never noticed before. And I think that heightens your awareness. But if, like you said, they said, if you see something, you say something because you could save someone's life if you do.
Like that person at the airport did.
Yeah, like the person at the airport did.
It's that awareness that I think a lot of people are going to be leaving with here tonight. It'll make us all think twice as we're walking around Walmart.
Amen.
Sadly, but it's the truth. I know we're talking a lot about, okay, you find these messages on your kid's phone. You said, Detective Edwards mentioned, you talk maybe, okay, go ask another family member, what do you think about this? At what point do you reach out to law enforcement and say, hey, we've got a problem on our hands? And I'll leave this open to anybody.
As early as you'd like. I'll be honest, the sooner the better. At least at Magic, we have a dedicated human trafficking team comprised of 5 officers and 1 analyst, or 5 detectives and 1 analyst. They field calls every single day from schools, from community members, from churches. Just, hey, heads up, this is going on. Can you look into this? And we're not saying this is a 911 situation. Obviously, if you have a 911 type of situation, an emergency, contact 911. But if you're just curious and you want a seasoned detective to look at something, please, please, please reach out to the Fresno Police Department, the Fresno Sheriff's Office, your local law enforcement agency, and somebody will look at it.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I'm primarily a detective who handles these kinds of cases, and I can promise you that I'm not going to turn you away if you come to me and say, hey, I have a concern about my child. The best case scenario is that it's nothing, but if it is something, we want to know sooner rather than later, because we want to focus on prevention rather than trying to pick up the pieces after the fact.
Chief, we thank you for making this a priority and having her handle this, because somebody needs to in this community.
I just want to add, if I can, that even if you think you've solved the problem, you've nipped the problem in the bud, and you've averted a tragedy, please let us know about it. We can take that information, do some additional investigation to maybe prevent another victim in another location from being injured.
Because a lot of times the ones that are approaching aren't even from here. Right. And who knows where else they're doing it. Okay, the question came in, how long do 290s have to register for? 290s again are registered sex offenders. How long do they have to register for?
That's going to be lifetime 290 registration for the bill that was passed by Senator Grove, which is amazing. I don't know if people here are familiar with a lot of the changes in California recently. This is actually the opposite direction that California's been going in. I can't think of the last time, at least as a prosecutor, that they've increased penalties.
21 years.
21 years, thank you. So it is lifetime registration for human trafficking of a minor.
And that was one of the hardest sells to my colleagues, because they were so adamant that that would ruin someone's life, and I just refused to accept that. And they kept saying that they were going to kill the bill, and I go, let's go talk to the media. I want to know what the public thinks. Do you think somebody who sells a child for sex should be registered as a sex offender and you know when they move into your neighborhood?
Yes.
I think the majority of Californians do. And so I'm like, let's go talk to the media. Come on, come with me. And they didn't really like that idea, so they were able to, they gave me the 290 registrant.
She's amazing.
No.
Otherwise, we're just a phone call away. The officer already knows that. Deborah, you mentioned the Bark phone. Somebody asked, what are your thoughts? You mentioned the Bark app. Somebody said, what are your thoughts on the Bark phone, and is it better than the app?
That just depends. I think that's a matter of opinion. The Bark phone is going to be a lot easier for you to use, so that definitely is an option. It's going to come pre-equipped, and there's going to be no workarounds with that. And so hindsight, and I want to just, because another question that gets asked is, like we said before, is, well, how did this happen to your child? You have all this information. I was in, what some of you may have walked in here today, I was under this assumption that because of who I was and because of what she knew, my child, and I talked about that, which is insane to me looking back, and I was like, this wouldn't happen to my child. It's not going to happen. She knows better. Right? So again, I want to make sure I just reiterate that it can happen to anyone, no matter how much education you have. A Tesla in your home, so work it out where you can. If not, the Bark app is also it also works really, really well. It just probably will take some help equipping all the apps on your child's phone. And again, I like what the detective said. I wanted to reiterate something else. I really feel like Bark and iOS and all the different platforms we talked about are preventative. Because across the board, I mean, obviously there's no 100% absolute. Those who are already engaging in trafficking, they initially, one of the first things that happens is they garner a second phone, just so you know that. So unfortunately, once that line is crossed, especially if there's a third party, I mean, they all get a second phone or a second electronic device to supersede that. So again, this is about prevention and never getting to that point.
And just another thing that wasn't mentioned that should be mentioned, and I'm going to get like evil eyes from the kids here in the room. Parents, make your kids, that's important. So,
and on the note of sharing locations, look at your kids' phones. See who they're sharing their location with, because of the hundreds of cases that I've prosecuted, I cannot think of a single case where the trafficker was not following the victim's location. And on Debra's point that they typically have two phones, very common. Parents will take away one phone, and then our detectives go and speak with the victim, who's generally uncooperative and doesn't, want to give information because they don't want their phone taken. And then they'll ask, do you have a second phone? And, the kid will look at the detective, make sure mom and dad isn't looking, go under their pillow or under their mattress and say, I'll show it to you, but you can't take it. So, and almost 100% of the time, they are being followed on, what is it called?
Find My iPhone 360.
360 Live or Find My Phone or Find My Friends. That is very important.
And it's totally legal, just FYI, we do this within our safe houses, and I know you're going to be like, dang, yeah, I wish I lost my child, and I would have done all this if I could have, right, is for under $50, and, depending on how good of one you want to get, did you know you can go on Amazon in the next couple days have an electronic detector? And it is simply a wand like you see. We use this in our programming because we have those coming in and they can't have phones. We find phones all day long. I will walk through our girls' room just what's here? What are you going to tell me? Am I pulling this out or are you pulling it out for me? Right? And it will detect electronics that are not usually detectable. Wander the rooms if you think that there's something else going on. So pick one up.
Question from one of the students here saying, as teenagers, what are some signs that we can look for in our friends that they are possibly being trafficked?
I'll jump in and I'll tell you, number one, what you want to look at is a sudden change in their social circle. So if this is your friend, right, then you know them. You know them very well. If they're suddenly, that's first red flag. If they suddenly become distant from you, you need to start asking questions. And I think that these are the tools that we need to look at for fentanyl, for human trafficking, self-harm. I mean, the list goes on and on. So don't even just tunnel vision it down to human trafficking, because we want to keep them safe from all things. So I'll let you guys throw out some, but the very first is they're going to distance themselves. A trafficker, all those people closest, and that includes their peers.
They will isolate your child.
Yeah.
As a peer, I would look for your friend or your buddy leaving campus with somebody you don't know, not sharing information on who they're dating, and it's somebody that's not at the school. And I know Fritzler is in the audience, and she is an assistant district attorney at the Fresno County District Attorney's Office, and she will be the first to tell you, if you talk to her, that not only do adults traffic juveniles, but juveniles can traffic juveniles also. So if you see, some behavior going on with one of your girlfriends and her boyfriend, and he's being abusive or controlling, and they're leaving campus, and suddenly they have all sorts of cash, that's going to be a sign.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that they hit the nail on the head pretty much, with cash, jewelry, things of value that you know that your friend isn't working, their family may not have the means to provide that for them, but really pulling away from their friend group. Maybe it's a Friday night and there's a football game, and this person is someone who always went to the football games. They're part of that social circle, and now they're out, doing something else, and you're getting picked up by school, possibly, most likely, by somebody who's probably older than your peer group, and they don't go to your school, and you're like, well, who's that? And ask the questions and just be observant. I mean, I think good, reasonable, common sense. And when that person completely withdraws and they're going out with different people, they're not coming to the football games, it's either, hey, they're involved in drugs, it could be human trafficking, it could be that they're going down a road, even if it's not human trafficking, it could be they're going down a road that they shouldn't be going down, and you need to help your friend out and get them back on track. So those are some of the things to look for. And like you said, like leaving school early and things like that too are huge red flags that they're being controlled.
It's like one of those things where the friend should ask a ton of questions and then go online to try to look up this person and find out as much as they possibly can. Just as 20-somethings do when it comes to their friend dating someone new, and you play Facebook detective, right?
Troll on, kids, troll on.
And then snitch away.
Why? Because if you see something,
Say
something, as we keep saying. Okay, there was also another question that came in, and I know we've talked about this before, but for those that just joined us, how can you get help for someone who is being trafficked? Where I know that they turn to law enforcement, can they turn to your organization?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we get a lot of the light here, so definitely you could call Breaking the Chains. But I want you to understand that if you just put human trafficking, you might forget this, right? Especially all of the organizations represented here, including Breaking the Chains within the Central San Joaquin Valley, work directly with the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We love to give this number out. We like this to be our main number because they will ask you the right questions and they will get you to the right entities. If that's law enforcement, if it's Breaking the Chains, if it's Central La Familia, if it's Central Valley Against Human Trafficking, Central Valley Justice Coalition, they will get you to the right place. So again, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. There's also a text. Jackie, I'm going to ask you to yell it out. 7377, I believe. 733, right? 233-733. You just text me in any search engine. The first thing that's going to pop up, maybe the second, if it's a really bad search engine, is going to be the National Human Trafficking Hotline, so you'll always have access to that number. Please call them.
And I want to reiterate that if anybody's not here with us today and you missed any of these things that she's mentioned, this is streaming live, and the stream will be up on CanePage.com, on our CanePage YouTube page, as well as our Facebook page, so that way they can write any of this stuff down.
And just for your guys' information, the state of California has the most calls into the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the most by far.
I was trying to find some statistics on this, and according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, California is, as you mentioned, one of the largest sites of human trafficking in the U.S. For some reason, the stats that are most readily available are from 2018. Is this something that's not monitored as much as it should be, or is
The
it just
tip
that we're
report,
finding?
it's getting better. I mean, that's a Polaris, that's a National Human Trafficking Hotline question. But we did have a recent tip report that came out, so it's just TIP. So if you look at the Human Trafficking Tip Report, that is going to be the most updated and, in my opinion, the most accurate report. And it is a report that is also curated by multiple federal law enforcement agencies. And so that, again, is the Human Trafficking TIP report. And I think they clear one every year. So 2024 should just be getting ready to come out. I know I received 2023s in the middle of last year. So
If we get the ag report, we can get the report on this as well.
right,
All
absolutely.
these other stuff that's coming in. Okay, I know we had some cards passed out. Are there any cards that were not collected from any of you? Okay, seeing as there are none, if you don't mind, I'm going to go down the line one more time with our panelists just for some closing thoughts, and then we will wrap up with Councilmember Michael Montelongo. The Chief?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, obviously. I think the one thing you're going to take away, if you haven't already, is that you and your children are the front lines of preventing tragedy. Be involved in your child's life. Be involved as much as you possibly can to make sure this doesn't happen. You have the greatest chance of preventing a tragedy, much more so than we do in law enforcement. So be aware of what's happening in your child's life and focus on saving their life at any moment. So thank you again for coming tonight.
I'm going to kind of drop a bomb on you guys before we finish here, but it's something that nobody's mentioned yet that I think is worth mentioning. The average age that our victims get involved in human trafficking is younger than you probably think. It's 12 years old. So you need to start talking to your children, not just your teenagers. Start talking to them early. Start talking to them often, because if the average age they're getting involved is 12, then think about all the activity that's leading up to that point. So even for our younger ones who aren't here, talk early, talk often, keep those lines of communication open so that inevitably when they are approached by somebody, because it's probably going to happen to everybody in this room at some point if you're active online, make sure that they have enough comfort in your relationship that they are willing to come to you, because that's going to be the most important preventative key right there before something happens.
Sheriff Zanoni?
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and listening to what we have to say. I know it's a lot to take in, but like I said before, you're getting the full circle perspective here, and we are the first line of defense. As a parent of 3, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's human trafficking, and all these other things that are out there, the inappropriate content that's online, we have to protect our children. Children are going to be the future of our community, and we have to protect every single one of them and do everything that we can to ensure that they're safe, that they have good environments to learn in, and that they have that opportunity to become an adult and make something of themselves. And one of the things I want to talk about here is Shannon Grove and the work that she's done in Sacramento. It has been a tough uphill fight in law enforcement with the way things had been going prior to this last year. I mean, we had a law changed where it was no longer illegal to loiter for the purposes of prostitution. Thankfully that it's now a felony to human traffic a child. We got Prop 36, percent of Californians approved it. We're making strides in the right direction. But everyone in this room has a voice. Yep. And when you're looking out there to vote for somebody for a public office, whether it's for my office, whether it's for district attorney, whether it's for assembly, state senate, Congress, to take the party divisions out of it, the D's and the R's and all that. We need to elect people who are going to stand for public safety, people who are going to protect our children and ensure qualities of life in our community. And we can't lock everybody up, but there has to be consequences. Individuals have to vote for laws. They're going to hold people accountable and make sure there's consequences. So hopefully it will deter people from committing some of these crimes, and we won't have so many individuals in our prisons. But we have to focus on public safety, because I think that has been an issue for many years past. And now, like I said, with Prop 36 and with some of these other things, we're starting to see a change. Those are the questions we need to ask of these individuals who are running for office, who are running for re-election, and we need to make sure that when it comes to public safety, they have our best interest and the interests of our communities here in Fresno County in mind. And I want to thank you again for coming out tonight.
Deputy DA.
Thank you. I want to echo the detective's comments about the age. Age is one of those things that we think, oh, 16, 17, 18, maybe getting into the lifestyle. She is absolutely correct. The majority of victims that we see come through are between 12 and 13 to 16. And how many of you here have a little sibling, a little sister? Raise a show of hands. Okay. So I'm going to ask that each and every one of you protect your little sibling. We have cases more often than not that involve big sister, 18, 19, 20 years old, with small children going out to hotels and motels, bringing little sister, 15 years old, along, and then ultimately getting little sister into that lifestyle. The reason I mention this is because there's a case that we prosecuted where there was a civilian that called in, saw something and said something. There are these two girls on the corner of this location. One of them looks really young. And that led to the arrest of 3 separate adult traffickers of a minor victim. So even if you're driving around and you just see something, you're like, she looks young. That thought is all it takes. Call your local office and say, hey, get somebody out on this corner, or down the street, this girl looks like she's under 18. And I can tell you right now, the response time will be quick. And with that, I appreciate all of you coming out and listening. And I would like to thank all of our law enforcement partners and Debra. I mean, Debra's a rock star. She has all the resources in the world, and she will talk to you for hours. And thank you, everyone.
Sheriff Zanoni, I would be remiss in not bringing this up, and forgive me for not having mentioned this earlier, but I know that we have a number of parents here who also speak Spanish. They might have the concern, okay, what if I am undocumented, my child is undocumented, and they have been brought into this as well? Can they face any consequences for reporting any of this? Because we really want to keep our youth safe, and that includes all of our youth, especially in the rural communities.
That is an excellent question, and no, there is no punishment. You're not going to be in trouble for reporting this to law enforcement to protect your children. I want to mention something else. The Sheriff's Office, we offer what we call you are undocumented and aren't legal citizens. They have the opportunity to apply for a U visa, which will give them a protection, at least while they're here, being the victim of a crime. But the reality is that that's not my job. My job is public safety. My job is to investigate, arrest, and prosecute criminals. And so please give us a call. We are not going to ask your immigration status. We want to know what we can do to help you and your child to keep you safe.
And on the issue of human trafficking, I know there's always that, forgive me, I'll move on, but there's always that urban myth of the street side vendors that we see with the flowers. How often do we find that those tend to be victims of human trafficking as well? Because I know that that's something that sometimes people will say, but whether it's actually true, you guys would know.
So there's a case, I will call this the case of Maria. She reported to Community Regional Medical Center, and there was a social worker that came in, thinks she's being trafficked. Ultimately, she was being trafficked by an individual. She was brought over from Mexico to Los Angeles, paid $16,000. I believe it was her and her brother's fee for coming over the border. Was ultimately bought by an individual in Fresno and was put out on the corners of all over Fresno to sell flowers, amongst other things. She was absolutely terrified of the person that was trafficking her, and the living conditions that she was living in were deplorable. It was a small 1-bedroom studio with 7 men and she was the only woman. There were conditions that nobody should live in. And with the help of Breaking the Chains, Central La Familia, and other organizations, we did everything we could to help her. They even brought in, a special Spanish-speaking individual for her to take her to church to celebrate her birthday. And ultimately, her main goal was to go back home, and they assisted in getting her back home. So when you see these individuals on the corners, not all of them are being trafficked, but Maria specifically would have to get up at 5 in the morning and put together these flower bundles, and she would have to sell these at $20, I believe, $8 for herself, and she would have to give the remainder to her trafficker, that using the $8 that she earned to pay off the $16,000 debt. So imagine how long that would take, selling bundles of flowers from $8 earnings. So keep an eye out.
And if I could say, I just want to add out there, and I know my partners in the room would shake their head yes at this, this may be a whole other can of worms, but it is important you brought that up, Liz. It's because we do strongly believe as advocates that labor trafficking, foreign national trafficking, may even be larger than what we are seeing in the sex trade, but this is the most highly underreported form of human trafficking and victimization because of fear of various things, deportation, a lack of understanding of what their basic rights are, or even a normalization from the treatment that they have received in the countries that they are coming from. And this is not just happening in South America, this is happening coming out of China, just several other countries. So please understand that it's not a myth, it's just not reported. It's normalized within some of these cultures and communities. And so this is another place where you can see something and say something and echo again. If you absolutely don't feel comfortable with law enforcement, call Breaking the Chains, call Central La Familia, right? Call advocates, right? Consider that a lawyer on your team, right? We tell people that, if you're like, okay, I know for sure they're not going to allow us to call. No matter what I tell them, they're not going to let us call law enforcement. Call us, call advocates out who know what your rights are, who will be there for you, and make sure that you receive the care and justice that you deserve.
And like Debra said, that the labor trafficking is so very unreported. Every bill that we have introduced to start out always goes to cover labor trafficking and sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. And every time they take that amendment and force us to take the amendment to not include labor trafficking.
Very sad.
It is very sad because labor trafficking does target the immigrant community for fear of, law enforcement. But, I know I represent 3 counties and I have 3 incredible sheriffs. One of them is sitting right next to me. And their job is public safety. And I'm so glad that he said that because it doesn't matter. He's not interested in your immigration status, and neither are the sheriffs that I serve with. They're interested in making sure that you and your families are safe.
Yes.
I didn't mean to derail the conversation, but I just figured we'll touch upon that. Senator Grove, and then we'll wrap up with Debra before we call Councilmember Montelongo.
So again, I echo the panel's comments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being involved. If you're Shannon Grove CA or Shannon Grove 4CA, FORCA, they're 2 separate sites because one's the Senate, and I have to post senatorial stuff on there. One is a different site. It's a personal site. It's a campaign site for the Senate, and I'm not running for Senate, so I'm not, advocating that. I'm just saying that we can post things on there that are information that is different than we're allowed to post on the Senate that's approved by rules. So if you want to know information, you can follow the bills that we introduce. You can make phone calls. You can call. I know that I share them. So 3 other individuals who count the assembly, and you guys can reach out to their offices and ask them to support the legislation if it's important to you. You can engage in the process. If you want to travel, bring your church. I've had busloads of church. Jack Kibbs and others brought busloads of people up to testify on our bill. And I was so thankful that when we introduced SB 14 and Debra and everybody came up, they give Debra, with somebody with an incredible story like this, only 2 minutes to speak. She has 2 minutes to share her life story. And then there's people like individuals here in the audience. You could come up and say, I'm Pastor Montelongo, and I support this piece of legislation. I'm from Sanger, California. It took like 3.5 hours, I think, the first time to get through everybody on what we call the Me Too's, because it was a long time, because there were so many people that were engaged in this legislation. Like Sheriff Zanoni said, support your law enforcement. Support sheriffs that are going to protect you.
Yes.
They're elected representative, their highest federal elected representative in the state of California. The county, they represent the entire county. Support those people. You have one of the most awesome district attorneys that I have to inside joke, and she'll get it if she's watching. I have to teach her how to have a poker face when she's in those committees. And thing that happened in the committee and in the focus of the camera, you have our incredible district attorney from Fresno is watching what happened. So we have to teach her how to have a poker face, but she deeply cares for the safety and security of all of you here in Fresno County.
Yes,
so
she
that's
does.
important. Again, other electeds that will protect you and your families is important. And then, like I said, if you have legislative ideas from a nonprofit perspective or from a law enforcement perspective, I'm just the person that just carries the water for that up in Sacramento, and I promise to fight hard for all of you. And so please follow us. If you have any questions, you can reach out. My staff is here, and we are really good at responding to people. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, and Deborah.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. Just thank you guys so much for engaging and for coming out and making this a part of your night. There's a lot of other places you could be, and so it's definitely heartwarming, Sanger, to see you here. My husband and I are pastors with Pastor Lydia and Gilbert Montelongo, so this is our community as well. So we just really thank you guys, and of course, a special thanks to Mike Montelongo and the Montelongo family. You guys have been such an incredible champion for this community, for children, for justice, and for all the underserved. So I just want to make sure that you know that from the bottom of our hearts, we love you so much. And the last thing I want to say is, again, this is from a mother's heart. If you see something, you say something. You are the champions of the future, right? We're all going to work as hard as we can as the adults in this room to keep you safe and to keep the future safe, but you are the voices. You are the ones that will sit in your classrooms, that will go to your groups, that will say no more. Peer influence is the #1 navigation of media, of all consumerism. Everything that is really brought to light and what becomes normalized is normalized based on the youth group right here in this room. So whenever you begin to change the tone, when you begin to say this is not acceptable, this is not okay, OnlyFans is, as an example, not cool, I don't think that's hip, right? When young men within this room begin to make sure that those around you, whatever your partner choice is feeling valuable and valued, and that your body is not a commodity, you will single-handedly eradicate human trafficking here in America. And so I am pleading with you, I am looking out to you to be a voice for the future, to make sure that you are the tide that changes this wave that is coming ashore. Thank you guys.
And as Councilmember Montelongo makes his way up here, just want to remind parents of the importance of really teaching on that. It's up to us to let our kids know that they're priceless. Again, we want to thank law enforcement. Thanks again to Senator Shannon Grove, who made the drive down here, or up here. I'm not sure where you were, but thank you again so much for being here with us. And for really giving a voice to the voiceless, and Deborah, for all that you do to help them out. Again, if we at least touched one person and made a difference for one person, we've done enough, but that's just a start. Thank you, and again, Councilmember Mike Montelongo, if we could give a round of applause one more time as he organizes.
So we're gonna dismiss in just a couple of minutes. I want to say a couple of thank yous, but just one thing that they reiterate, and I'm gonna say it again. If you see something,
Say something.
if you see something,
Say something.
that's one of our models here at Sanger Unified School District. If you go through our campuses, you're going to see some of those things that are on top of our doors, and it tells our students, if you see something, say something. If it's this, if it's about illegal drugs on campus, if it's about bullying, whatever the case may be, if you see something, say something. And there's plenty of people in your school community that you could reach out to and talk to them to get the help that you need when you're in time of trouble or you see a friend in trouble. So just make sure you do that. For the parents, thank you for being out here. This is, to me, was important to do something like this. I've been doing town hall meetings. This is my second one. Last year was one on fentanyl. and the importance of letting people know the dangers of it and how to deal with it, and having a panel of experts tell us how to deal with it. And now today was about human trafficking. And I'm not going to be done. We're going to do some more town hall meetings on other important things that affects not just the city of Sanger community as a whole, but everywhere. This, what they talked about, over $1 billion industry, that's just incredibly sad. But I know that our people here are fighting to keep us safe, to make sure we have tough laws, and we have great law enforcement to put people away. And that's what we need. And with your sand from the Sanger scene, they are my backbone. It's only us three that put something like this together. It's a dream that I put out, and they helped me make it reality. And so without their help, we wouldn't be here today. So I really appreciate those two hard workers that continue to believe in the things that I believe. So thank you so much. Ace Catering and their partners. Your meal was free today. It wasn't paid by us, it was paid by them. It was donated, and I appreciate them. So if you give them a round of applause for having our meal here today. For the students, when it comes to the prom tickets that in just a few minutes you're going to go see if you won, those came from great sponsorship. So a church that's dear for me, my brother's church, Tabernacle of Praise Christian Center.
Yeah.
And the Sanger scene as well. And this is for both Sanger High and for Sanger West students that participate today. And then Academy West Insurance was also a good sponsor that's locally here in town. Somebody that's really special to me, a good friend of mine, is Brian's way over there to my left. He's the person that makes sure this location here is great. The sound is great. Nobody ever sees them, but he does the hard job making sure we have good audio, good seating. So thank you, Brian. I truly appreciate you all being out here and just sacrificing your evening. And I know it takes time. You know, I'm going to give you one example how it is just to bring a group here. I had to give them 4 to 5 different dates to see how many of them could all fit in one day. It took time, but we made it possible. And January, Human Trafficking Month. And so it's just an honor to have you guys here and just to bring out the information you bring out. My colleagues, the mayor was here. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez is in the back. Councilmember Dolores Melendez is in the back as well. Thank you for being supportive of mine in District 4. Appreciate that. My city manager is in the back as well. Mr. Osen, appreciate him being here and supporting me as well. Thank you for Channel 26 for streaming it and Channel 21 for being here. And that means a lot to me because that means it's just not here. This went out and it's going to continue to grow out. So appreciate that. With that being done, those of you that have not eaten, there's still some food for those who have not eaten. And for the students, just go way the back to the left. Stand over there, make sure you have your tickets. They're going to do the raffle and see if you win some great prizes, especially those prom tickets. Thank you again for coming. Have a great evening. God bless you.